I was not the genius, brilliant idea person. I was just a guy who said yes, listening to your customers, understanding the problems, saying yes, building a great product. Like, it's a fundamental to being a CTO.
How do you think AI is going to impact, that role division there? How do you think people are going to think about that? Are we going to get product managers who go, hey, I don't need engineers anymore, I can code myself?
A lot of us feel like a failure because we can't do all of these things. And I think I feel like a failure because I'm not good at doing certain parts of this, or I don't like doing certain parts of it.
But are we a dying breed, the CTO? Is that not going to be needed in the future, given what we've just talked about? Welcome back to another episode of the CTO Lens with me, David Crawford. Today's guest has over 20 years of experience founding and leading technology companies, the co-founder and former CTO of Vind Solutions, and the founder and former CEO of Stackify. He's now the CEO and co-founder of Full Scale, helping companies build and scale high-performing engineering teams. Please welcome Matt Watson.
Hey, thanks for having me today.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, Matt. Fill out the picture for us. Where have you come from? What have you been doing? How did you get to where you are today?
Like most people, I'm just a guy looking for something to do. And, throughout all these years, people just come to me with the problems and I like trying to help them solve them. I'm just a problem solver. And that's how I got my very first software development job I ever had. That's how I started my first company. Actually, a couple other companies I co-founded all came that way. Like, somebody had a problem and I was the technical co-founder. I was not the genius, brilliant idea person. I was just a guy who said yes. And I've always just been that way. And it's been really good for my career. And I think it's also a key to being good at any kind of software engineering and building a product. It's like listening to your customers, understanding the problems, saying yes, building a great product. Like, it's a fundamental to being a CTO.
That's really interesting and great that you've come straight out the track saying, I wasn't the ideas guy. I was just the guy who could. I was the guy who could do. And if people asked me to do, I said, yeah, sure, why not? I like that. It's a very fresh attitude. You're not claiming genius level status here, right?
I read about this in my book in Product Driven, that if you're not sure where to start, as a software engineer or product leader, it's like you just always start with the customer. What does the customer need? Because that's one of the mistakes I've made in my career, is thinking that I know better than they do, right? Like that's a mistake a lot of us make. We think we know better than the customer does, but that's one of our big challenges. We don't listen to them enough.
It takes a little while to learn that, doesn't it? So you touched on your book there. Tell us a little bit about your book, how that came about, where it is now.
Yeah, in the summer of 2024, I had to give a speech at a dev conference, and I decided to do it about how software engineers need to think outside the code. They need to think more about the customer and the product and the big picture and all that stuff. And I really enjoyed giving the talk and got a lot of great feedback on it. And that inspired me to change my podcast to be less about entrepreneurship and be called Product Driven, and inspired me to write the book. And so the book is about software engineering leadership and how to build teams that create the right culture so software engineers can think more about the customer, the product, the big picture. It's one of the biggest gaps that we have in software engineering is a lot of developers are very focused on the code and, thinking inwards about what they do all day long instead of thinking outwards to how it impacts the customers, the market, all that kind of stuff.
I think that's really interesting. That's how Matt and I first met. He was looking for, I guess, beta readers, as it were, to have a look at the initial chapters of his book. And I was like, yeah, this is an area that really interests me. I come from the world of technology like you do, Matt, but I'm much more interested in the world of product and business.
Yeah.
The tech is important. Of course it is. And it can still be sexy and exciting. But, what you do with it is much more interesting, right? And so I think I was attracted to that. I read the first few chapters of your book, and I think they were really insightful. And that's what stimulated me to say, hey, you gotta come on here and share this with some of our listeners, because I think it'll be really good.
I really wanted to write a book that was that cross section between engineering and business and startups and product. Like, there are lots of books about all those topics, right? About startups and business and how to scale a business and all these things. Lots of engineering books about all sorts of engineering topics. But I wanted to create something that was kind of the, Venn diagram center point of all that stuff about how to create an engineering team that can actually go build this stuff. Because it's easy to say, hey, we raised $10 million or we have this startup or this business idea or whatever. But then it's like, how do you actually build this thing? Like, how do you actually go build a product? And they're like, well, the engineering team just builds it. But they don't. Like, the engineering team has to understand product. They have to understand the customer. And I felt like there was a missing guide to that. And so that's what I tried to help write.
I think that's really great because it is still, you think, oh, we've had product management, we used to talk about the Spotify model years ago. It's been around for a while. You kind of think that people got it. Yet this morning I was doing some technical due diligence consulting for a private equity company, and the target company, we asked them how they, their work gets into the technology team, and they go, oh, we've got product managers. And I was like, oh, this sounds like it could be going in the right direction. And then I said, so just talk us through that a little bit. And they went, well, the product managers decide what they want, and then they tell the technology team. And I was like, okay, all right, we're still back here in that kind of like end of the chain. You get told what to do, you get disenfranchised by it. But our technologists are so much more clever than that, right? It's been proven time and time again. Get them in early, get them involved, get them motivated around it, right?
Yeah, I think software engineers are all over the spectrum of that, right? There are definitely some that it's like they like playing with their Legos and they want everybody to leave them alone. They like happy to be in the basement playing with their Legos, right? But then there are a lot of developers that are super creative. They want to have a seat at that table. They're really passionate about creating a product and solving business problems and all that kind of stuff. In a lot of big companies, that is not really rewarded. Like, nobody wants that. They want you to just fall in line and be part of the assembly line, take the requirements to get shoved down your throat and just go build it. Don't ask any questions, right? And that's really disheartening. I mean, that's why a lot of developers feel lost. They feel a lack of purpose of what they're doing, right? They're just like, I don't know why we're doing this, but this is what I was told to do. It's a stupid idea, but here we go.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
No, you speak a lot of truth there, Matt. Well, listen, thank you for that generous introduction. Really appreciate it, and hopefully we'll put a link about your book, and this podcast will boost your sales.
Let's sell 1 million books.
Brilliant. Okay, so before we get into the main topic, we're just going to get to know Matt a little bit more. We've got 10 quickfire questions for you, Matt. Nothing too tricky in here, but let's have the first answer off the top of your head, okay?
I'm ready.
Okay. Early bird or night owl?
Early bird.
Great. Cloud or on-prem?
Cloud.
Okay. What's your biggest tech pet peeve? What do you hate about tech?
Too much focus on the engineering itself and not the customers.
Okay. As per your book.
Yeah.
Who owns tech in 2025? The CIO or the CTO?
CTO.
Okay, that's a popular answer. I think I might know the answer to this one. Agile or waterfall?
Neither one.
Oh, okay. We're going to have to dig into that in a minute, right? Let's keep going. Which tech conference is unmissable for you?
I mean, it has to be your guys' conference, right?
Yeah, brilliant. That is the answer we were looking for. Yeah, the London Tech Leaders Summit in October. Bring it on, bring it on.
I'm a little far away, but I hear it's great.
Yeah, we'll get you on all-inclusive tickets. Don't worry, it'll be fine, mate.
Nice.
No problem. Yeah.
Awesome.
AI, game changer or just another tool?
I'm going to say just another tool.
That's a popular answer as well, I have to say. We'll talk about that a bit more. And what is your guilty pleasure? You know, what is your gadget of choice, your tech guilty pleasure? Have you got like a space station sort of set up in your office there, or what do you like?
You know, I'm probably going to say my podcast setup.
Okay, tell us a little bit about that.
I got the teleprompter and the 4K camera and the whole thing, and yeah.
Oh, okay, good. And that's what we're using here. We're in a great studio here. So shout out to Julian, who's sorting us out, our production manager on all of this. And then the last question, coffee or energy drinks?
Coffee. Coffee with milk.
Coffee with milk?
Yeah.
But aren't you American?
Yeah.
Isn't it coffee with black or with cream?
Oh, I like a good cappuccino.
Oh, okay, excellent. We like a European taste American. We like that. That's great. Brilliant, brilliant. All right, well, listen, thank you for those quick fire questions. Hopefully we got to know a little bit about you a bit more, Matt. Okay, we're going to move on with Matt now to the main interview. We've got some interesting questions to talk about here. The first one we're going to get into, Matt. You touch on this in your book, so you'll be able to expand on this a lot for us. The 4 different engineering leadership roles and how that applies to being a CTO. So we talk a lot about being a CTO here, but you're straight in with like, hang on a second, CTO, there's like 4 different engineering roles associated with that. So unpick that for us a bit. Tell us what that's about.
Yeah, I think everybody knows when you think of CTO, there's a clear difference between like a startup CTO versus the CTO of like some big mega corporation, right? And or the industry you're in and all these things, right? It definitely means different things to different roles. But when I was writing the book and when I think about this, I think about my own career, and I think other people will understand exactly what I'm saying as I describe this. I was always the product person and pretty good at the technical part of it. Okay. But a lot of people who are that persona are not very good at the operational side. They're two totally different personalities. And you see this with somebody who's the CEO of a company. Usually they're very visionary, have big ideas, big picture kind of thinking and viewpoint of things. They're not operations people, right? So what do? They hire a chief operation officer or VP of operations, whatever. Somebody that is a detail person, somebody who likes doing all the people and process management, all that stuff. That exact same concept relates to software engineering and product building. So people that are really good at building products and strategy and maybe super innovative are probably not the same people that are going to manage your Jira workflow and like all this goofy stuff that is important, but it's more operational stuff, right? I think that's super important. And a lot of us feel like a failure because we can't do all of these things. And I think earlier in my career, as a early CTO in my late 20s as a startup founder, like I feel like a failure because I'm not good at doing certain parts of this, or I don't like doing certain parts of it. And so I think that's the key, is understanding these are really different personalities. So in the book, I write about 4 different roles. So I mentioned product, technical, strategy, and operations. Those are the 4. And I think most people are good at 1 or 2 of them. Very few people are good at 3 or 4 of them. And I would say if you think you're good at all 4 of them, you might be like a purple squirrel. Like these people really don't exist that are good at all 4 of these from my perspective. So they're just different personality types.
Yeah, I think I really understand that. I think we'll touch on people who try to be all of them in a minute, right? But just understanding that role, does that mean that you have to choose early in your career? Does that mean you have to go, right, I've done a bit of coding, I know my way around, a bit of technology. I'm now going to focus on the operational work stream, and that's what I'm going to do. Or I'm going to focus on the strategy work stream of becoming a technology lead. Do you have to pick a lane?
I think it's where you just naturally gravitate towards, right? So we talked earlier about different kinds of software engineers, some that love to play with their Legos, they're very technical. And then you got some that love the product, they love the strategy, they want to understand the big picture, they want to understand the why, right? Like we all fit in different spectrums of these things. And they're all really important. Like we need technical leaders. We need people that are software architects, know how to solve hard problems and make things scale. We need those super strong technical leaders. But that's a little different skill set, right, than somebody who is really good at strategy or really good at operations or maybe really good at product. There's some overlap in all of these things, and people can be bits and pieces of all of these, but they're slightly different personalities. I mean, I think for a lot of people, you could probably talk to them for a few minutes and kind of figure out like, oh, this person's like super nerdy, super in the weeds, probably super technical, but they might really struggle at the strategy part. They might struggle at the big picture, right? Like sometimes it's people's personality too. It doesn't mean they can't do these things, but most people are going to gravitate towards personality wise, I think, one of these buckets primarily.
And I think you're talking about sort of strengths in terms of that gravitating towards somewhere. It's likely to be, a strength or a passion or an interest. Yeah, and I think that's true. When people who know me well and know my skill set well, they'll often introduce me and they'll say, "Oh, yeah, Dave's a CTO, but he's more like a COO." Because I'm interested in how the business works. I'm interested in all that kind of stuff, right? Rather than interested in me as a CTO is more like an architect, that's the, so yeah. I think it's okay. The question is, what do people do, or what do individuals do if they've gravitated to one area, but they want to progress into a more senior role? Can they get to CTO if they haven't got a broader brush?
Well, it's the same thing I would tell any startup founder. Is you got to figure out what you're really good at. Even me, I was the CEO. I went from being CTO to CEO, and it's like, oh, what does it even mean to be CEO, and how is that going to impact what I do? And I would give the same feedback around. You just have to figure out what your strengths are, and then surround you with people that can do the other things. So it's like, as a CEO, I focused a lot on product and marketing because I really like strategy and I like product, and I'm very creative. I'm good at the marketing part of it. Again, I hate operations. So I hire an operations person who's good at that part of it and who would run sales. And same thing from a CTO perspective, right? It's just trying to figure out, what are you good at? What aren't you good at? And then surrounding yourself with people that can help you build out the team that you need, because you're not going to do everything. And that's the first thing, is admitting, you're like, I'm really good at this. I hate doing that thing. I need to hire somebody to do this thing.
And do you think that's taken into account, particularly in the startup world, when they get going? Because what you just described in enterprise world or even scale up world, that's fine. You're going to have the budget. You're going to be able to go, these are the things I can do. I need to go and get these clever, talented people and surround myself, right? I think we've all experienced that that's the right thing to do, to build that capability around you. But in startup world, it's lean, it's mean, you haven't got much money. Aren't they looking for your, what did you call it, purple squirrel? Aren't they looking for that person who can come in and at the cost of one person do all of that?
Well, what I see most often at full scale when I talk to our customers that are maybe struggling with their engineering team or their leaders, more often than not, they have a engineering leader, whatever their title is, VP, CTO, whatever it is, that is usually more of a technical leader. They're really strong technical. Maybe they were, just a senior software developer before, or whatever. They got a promotion, got this opportunity, got this job. Maybe they were never a leader or manager anytime in the past, but they became the startup CTO, right? And eventually, the types of symptoms I see is they're like, well, we have a lot of quality issues, or they're not very good at managing the other team. There's a lot of bugs in our software. We're missing all our deadlines. Um, a lot of times what you hear is like, this person, they end up just kind of being the hero. They end up being the hero, running around trying to fix all the things that are broken, but they never help get the right processes in place. They don't train people. They don't mentor people. They don't help build the team, right? And that's because they're usually more of a really strong technical leader. They're basically like a software architect or a senior developer who just struggles with the operational side of it. And, a lot of us can grow into these different areas, but it's also realizing that you just need help. And to your point, it takes budget, it takes money. And so a lot of times that's what I end up telling these other founders that are struggling for various reasons. Like, hey, your CTO is great. They're brilliant. They get the product. They even get the strategy of what you're doing. They're super brilliant technically. They just don't know how to run a team.
Yeah.
They're just not an operational person.
And I wonder, I think we can all buy into this. You need the right people to do the right role and bring that right experience, that right sort of flavor of skills. I think that, one of the possible answers in startup world, I'm not sure about in the US, but it's become really popular in the UK and Europe for fractional leadership.
Yeah.
I myself am currently doing 4 fractional roles. And the benefit of that is you get my specialism, whatever that might be, or Fred's specialism, more operational, more strategic, whatever. And you can afford to have 4 different people because you're only paying them 1 day a week or something like that. Do you think that could work in that scenario?
I do a lot. And at full scale, we have several clients that do this, and I think it works really well. I think the other thing to consider is when you're hiring that early CTO, be it fractionally or full time, I'd actually rather have somebody that is strong technically than operations, because the last thing you need when you're an early stage startup, like, less than 5 million in revenue, like very small team, is somebody who's brilliant at operations, but doesn't really help contribute to the product or technical, like somebody who just manages meetings and like schedules lots of meetings and talks to lots of people and wants to create a lot of processes. Like, you need the minimum amount of those things, right? So you need that person later. Like, I'm okay with hiring that early CTO that is more brilliant technical and product, knowing that operations is their weakness, knowing that, hey, when we're successful and we've got a product and we're selling it to the market, I'll go hire that other person.
Yeah.
Because I feel like if you start with the other person, you may never get there.
Good operations is a problem to have, right? You want that, right? And if you're there and you need somebody great at operations, it's probably because you've started to scale your business, right?
Yeah, it's a good problem to have. Now, it still takes money, right? And you're
Of
like, hey,
course.
that's great. We've got some revenue. We need this help, but I still can't afford it. It's like, well,
So let's flip back to this concept you touched on a little while ago about a hero, somebody who's trying to be it all. Maybe, like you say, they were hired in those early days as a startup as a more technical CTO, and then, they're trying to save the company money, or they just don't want to appear incompetent or whatever. So they go, do you know what? I'm just gonna Google how to do operations, or I'm just gonna like read a book or something, right? And they're gonna try. How do we plan for that? How does the CEO lead a culture that doesn't require that?
you got to create ownership in the team, right? You've got to be able to delegate and create ownership to the team instead of just spoon feeding them all the time and just having them be order takers, right? If they're just order takers and they're always just sitting around waiting for you to tell them what to do, you're the bottleneck, right? You end up being the hero. The only way to really scale is to hire people and build ownership in that team, get them to take ownership around what are we doing, how are we doing it, why are we doing it. And in an early stage startup, I think that's really important. Now, I mean, sometimes early stage startups are wildly successful because they have a leader that has a brilliant idea and they're brilliant technically. Maybe they just need a couple order takers to help will this thing into existence, right? And that happens, but then eventually it doesn't scale. Eventually it breaks, right? Like that engineering leader ends up being the hero and the bottleneck of everything, and they never built a team around them that can scale. And this is part of what I tried to convey in my book. My book is about is like how to create teams that can scale, and so you're not the bottleneck. And it's hard because to some degree you have to slow down a little bit. It's like, well, instead of just telling them what to do, I got to spend more time with them. I got to explain why. I need to get their input. I got to get them to be on board with why we're doing it this way and get them to understand it really well, instead of just telling them go do this, right? Like it takes more time to build a team that takes this ownership, but it's also really hard to be the bottleneck and the hero all the time. It's super stressful. Like, so to some degree, it's like pick your hard. Which hard do you want? Do you want the heart of building the team or the heart of you being the bottleneck? And when you're at different stages of a startup, maybe you pick slightly different versions of the hard. I get it.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think the phase is important. And also I think, and your book plays to this a little bit, I feel, is that if you invest in that time getting the engineers bought in and thinking, product driven,
Yeah.
then actually maybe you can save some money on a whole bunch of expensive product managers and product owners and all of the, the thing that Spotify told us that we need 10, 15 years ago. Maybe actually we just get some accountability and some understanding, and then we might have a few shekels left to go and buy an operational type leader, right?
Well, I think along those lines, I think most startup founders, the CTO and the rest of the founding team, also has to recognize there are already product managers, whether they believe it or not. Maybe they're like, I don't know anything about product. I've never been a product manager before. It's like, this company was your idea. You've got the vision for this. You understand the market. You understand the industry. The reason we're all here is because of you. You're the product manager. Whether you believe it or not, you're the product manager, right?
I think that's great. I think that's great, Matt. I think just saying that out loud is like really, the CEOs of startups and scale-ups, they absolutely are. I'm working with one of my startups at the moment, and it's clear the CEO is the product manager, right? He's 100% the product manager. And I get my tech team saying, why does the CEO keep coming along and changing the product? Why does he go? And I'm like having to go, yeah, guys, he might be the CEO, but that's what he does, from 9 o'clock in the morning till 2 o'clock, from 2 till 5. He's the product manager, and we need that because we're small and we don't have anybody thinking like that, right?
But here's the other downfall that I see, and I think I mentioned this in the book, where a lot of startups fail is you have a CEO like that who's acting as the product manager who decides, you know what, I'm not an expert at being a product manager. I'm going to hire a product manager who doesn't know a single thing about my industry, our product, the legacy of what we built, not a single thing. I'm going to hire them. They're going to come in next Monday. Now they're the product manager and I'm done with this. Yeah, that's not going to work.
Yeah. I've seen that fail. I've seen that fail so many times. It's just this kind of like, I'm busy being the CEO. I'm busy talking to, VCs and private equity companies, and I've got to go and do important stuff out there. And it's like, to your point, remember why we're here. Remember what you're trying to do. You came up with an idea, a product, a service. You're the SME. don't drift away too far from it, right?
Yeah. Now, over time, you build this team, right? But you have to have ownership in the team. I think the way that things are going with AI as we continue to progress, I think a lot of software engineers are going to have to become basically product owners, right? Like they need to have more domain expertise, more product thinking. And we're still going to have product managers, and we'll still probably have some product owners, but we need the developers, the engineers doing more product thinking, right? And so we need all of us working together and collaborating and having more ownership in it. But I think as a leader, it's trying to figure out, how do I slowly build up that team, having more trust in the team, more delegation in the team, so I can slowly work myself out of it little by little, right? But yeah, you can't just hire somebody else off the street and like hand them the keys and like walk away and think like, oh, I hired a product manager, they're going to figure it all out. It's like, this is just not going to work.
Yeah, of course. And I suppose that plays to the point about somebody needs to own the vision, which
Yeah.
ultimately drives the product forward. And then, like you were saying, somebody needs to look after the farm, right? And those are
Figure out the details.
more often than not two different roles. They could be fractional if that's something in the early stage startup, and then when you scale, you go there. So I think it's really important for companies, not just the CTO, but the whole company, to understand those differentiations in the skill sets and the roles there.
I totally agree. And I think AI is changing a lot of this for sure.
Leading at the top means knowing how to handle the boardroom. And that's exactly what we're tackling at the Women Tech Leaders event on November the 13th. From building boardroom influence to navigating pushback and translating tech strategy, we're getting real about what it takes to lead effectively at the highest level. These events have been a real highlight of 2025 and are doubling in size every event. Head to the London Tech Leaders website to sign up. The link is in the bio. We'll see you there. How do you think AI is going to impact, that role division there? How do you think people are going to think about that? Are we going to get product managers who go, hey, I don't need engineers anymore, I can code myself? Are we going to get, developers who say, I'm talking to my virtual project manager, which I set up as an AI agent, and how do you think that's going to go?
That's every engineer's dream, right? It's to have a virtual chatbot to talk to that's your project manager and product manager.
Pretty much, yeah.
So within Full Scale, we're also have Full Scale Ventures. We're creating a couple of our own SaaS AI companies. And so, we're going through this today. I have a product manager that has been using V0 and Lovable and some different AI things to prototype stuff, which is great. And to some degree, it's also a problem because they will spend like many extra hours like perfecting these prototypes of things, where they could just go to the developers and be like, hey, I need a screen that has a grid on it with these 3 columns, and you can sort by this and whatever, go. And that would be the whole conversation. But no, they'll spend like hours and hours and hours like prototyping this like screen. So to some degree, these product managers can go way overboard with these tools today, and they're trying to some degree work around the engineering team. Like, the engineering is too slow, so they're trying to work around, and next thing you know, they're using some AI workflow thing, and I don't know, they think they're like rebuilding all this stuff. And that may mean like you've got the wrong engineering team, or they're not working with the engineering team the right way. I think a lot of us are having to work through that and figure that out, right? But I think if you let me talk about this for a second, I think there's a lot of great analogy from the low code and no code world that we're moving towards, if you want me to explain more.
Go for it.
So if you think about no code development for a minute, and honestly, this goes back 25 years from my career started, like Microsoft Access, we have Salesforce, like those are no code solutions, right? Now we have Bubble and all these other things. So you have no code, and then we have some low code stuff where you can do more advanced stuff. You can write a little bit of code. Even Salesforce kind of allows you to do that. You can write a little bit of code for Salesforce. We've got low code. Well, when you're in no code, you're not writing any code. So you really have to understand all the business part of this. Like, why are we building this? The workflow. You've got to be thinking, really about the product, the business, the outcome. You got to be very focused on the outcomes. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, you've got like a full stack software engineer, could be highly technical, could be building simple line of business apps, the whole spectrum of engineering, right? They're all over the spectrum too of how much they are doing product thinking, how much they understand the business, how much they understand the product and outcomes, all this stuff. But right in the middle, you've got low code. Low code's got to understand some about the business, but they've also got to understand some about the code. And I feel like AI is going to force all of the developers, more and more of them anyways, to this middle, to low code. If you think about it, on one spectrum, you had all business knowledge to build stuff with no code. And then the other spectrum was all code, not a lot of business knowledge. Low code is in the middle, right? You got to do some of both. And I feel like that's where everybody's headed.
And I don't think that's scary, Matt. I think that's okay. I think, the sense that you brought in your explanation there was like, we've got some good stuff over here, but it's been a bit over here, and we've got some good stuff over here, but it's been a bit over here. So bring it together. And I think that's a really good explanation, and I can see that happen. I can see AI tools tuning people into that. And I think that people, there will be a change in the workforce. There will be a change in how people come together, outside of engineering, but even within engineering. I think you'll get those who disappear back into the basement with their Lego and are doing the real, creating the tools that drive the low code and AI tooling. And then you'll get the people who are like, well, I kind of was okay talking about the product and understanding what the company's actually trying to do. So, I'm going to do a bit more of that, and then I'm going to apply a bit of low code, bit of AI stuff, and work from there. I think it's an okay future. I don't think anybody should be too scared of it.
I think it's all super interesting, and I have a couple other local friends here that have used Replit or Lovable or different things, and have built like entire startup MVPs. Like they don't know anything about software engineering at all. They're just entrepreneurs trying to solve business problems. And it's pretty cool to sit down with them and see what they have built. But then they immediately tell me, they're like, I have no idea if any of it works. Or they're like, this thing works sometimes and sometimes it doesn't. Or I log in as different users, but I see everybody's data because it's not like filtering it by user the right way. Like security doesn't really work or whatever. Like, and one of them ran it through Replit, and then Replit also does like some additional security scan or something. And he's like, oh, then it said I had 400 security issues in my code, and then Replit was going to have to fix all the security issues. And it's like, well, why didn't Replit fix that when they wrote the code the first time? It's like, I don't know. It's a great wild west of all these crazy things that we're going through. It's just super fascinating to see.
It's like when you say to ChatGPT, you didn't get that right at all. You ignored the question I asked you, and it goes, yeah, you're right, I did. And you're like, if you know you did the... Never mind. Listen, so let's just touch on the last point there, in that, you've got friends, colleagues who have gone out there and gone, I had a great idea. So I just got some tools and I did some stuff, and then I'm like, and then I got so far, and then I'm like, I don't really understand what's going on here. And is that going to affect the role of the CTO? We were going to talk about how to become a CTO, and I think you've given us some of the background that you need and the thinking that you need. But are we a dying breed, the CTO? Is that not going to be needed in the future, given what we've just talked about?
No, I think this is the golden era for people that understand product and can build software. The people that are at most at risk from a career perspective are the ones that don't understand business at all, right? If you see these stories now about software engineers that are like, I'm running 4 Claude code agents and I'm building stuff like crazy. It's like, they understand what needs to be built. They are true 10x engineers. And I would tell you a 10x engineer is somebody who just knows what needs to be built. There's no organizational friction. Nobody's telling them what to do. They got the Legos and they're the master builder. They're just building. They don't need instructions. They're just building, right? Those people today are the leaders of this generation, right? They know what needs to be built and they can just go build it. They're going to move at this speed.
And all they have to do is be pointed at the idea, the product, and get into it, and then they're grounding in building and figuring out what has to happen. Will stand them in good stead to be those product leaders of the future, right?
And AI is not going to help. Like, I'm going to throw out there 80-90% of most big companies. An example of this: I sold my company 15 years ago. They have still barely changed that product in 15 years. They've had 100 software engineers working there. They've probably spent over $100 million in R&D over the last 15 years. Yeah. Their problem isn't money. AI is not going to help them be more productive. They have been zero productive basically for 15 years. Their problem is they can't make decisions. They won't take risk. They won't innovate. It's all organizational friction. All
Yeah.
that organizational friction is just, it's hurdles and landmines in these companies, right? AI isn't going to fix that. It's not going to solve the problem at all.
It sounds like, based on what you've said, that almost one of the key tenets of the future technology leaders is going to be courage. Actually stepping into that world of product and saying, we can change, we can challenge, we can do something different here. AI might help you with some of that, but actually it's the attitude more than anything else.
I'm glad you mentioned that. In my book, I created what I called the product-driven model, which had 5 components in it. And one of them is courage. And courage was also the most important thing we identified at full scale that was important to all of our engineers. Because the ones who have courage to speak up, ask questions, validate assumptions, bring ideas, push back, say, hey, this is a bad idea. This is why we tried this before. This isn't going to work. All these things, they all take courage. But there's a lot of people that don't do that. They don't say anything, or they just say, yes, sir. Right? They say as little as possible in meetings. They don't push back. It takes courage to step up and have a different idea and push for change. But as leadership, we have to allow that. We have to reward that. We have to create that, right? We have to create psychological safety. When somebody in a meeting says, hey, I don't think this is a great idea, like, thank them for that, not shut them down and tell them, hey, no, you're going to do what I told you to do, right? Because that just reinforces people not to speak up, right? So that sort of courage is super critical, but it starts at the leadership level. As your point, like, even as leaders, we have to have courage to go fight for our teams and fight for what needs to be done. It takes courage at every level.
I think it does. And I think one of the things, I've learned as I've got older as a leader is to actually have the courage to let go a little bit and to be wrong a bit more.
Yeah.
Anybody who knows me will tell you, I don't like being wrong, Matt, right? I much prefer to be right. That is my standard mode of operation. But I am wrong on numerous occasions, and owning that and having the courage to let other people put me right or set me on the right path, actually time and time again has proven to be valuable, particularly when, evolving a solution or a service or a product.
I watched a great YouTube video the other day about decision making, and it described it as one-way doors versus two-way doors. It's like on a one-way door, you make the decision, you go through that door, there's no way to come back, right? Like, it's just a one-way door. Where most decisions in life are two-way doors. Like, I can go through the door, I try on a hat, I don't like the hat, come back through the door, put on a different hat. Like, I can try on hats all day long, right? And it gave some great analogies. But I think the key is a leadership is identifying which of these decisions have a high amount of risk and are sort of those one-way doors. Like, we have to get this right. We cannot make a mistake. Versus which ones are the two-way doors and the level of like, hey, if we make a mistake, is my team going to learn from it? And I'm okay with them learning from it, and they'll adapt and we'll keep going. And just the level of sort of severity and risk with all these decisions, figure out what am I going to delegate to the team and just let them figure it out. And I hope that they figure it out. If they don't, we'll learn from it and we'll keep going. And I'm okay with it. And earlier in my career, I probably didn't do near as much of that.
And I think that's the point, right? That's the message to our audience is earlier in your career, you will make these mistakes. You will make these wrong judgment calls. You'll get it wrong. But you wanted to learn at the time, and now your team wants to learn.
Yeah.
And stepping into that, owning that, having the courage for it, I think is really important. Listen, Matt, we could talk all day on this subject, but thanks ever so much for giving us a brief run through, extracting some bits out of your book, and helping us to really understand, the different configurations, the different skill sets, the different preferences we need as a CTO going forward. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This is great. And I definitely want to make it to your guys' conference sometime.
You will do. Okay, so Matt, you've proven to us that you're a capable, well-developed, seasoned CTO, right? You've been around the block, had lots of success, but you've challenged and changed as you've gone along the way, and that never comes without having some scars, having some things that have gone wrong. I wonder if you could share with us something that either something happened to you personally which affected the way you view business, or a mistake you made early in your career that's really impacted you as you've moved forward, and what you've learned from that. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, I think one of my favorite stories is I was the founder and CTO of Solutions for about 8 years or so. And after I left there, I decided to be the founder and CEO of a new company. and which was called Stackify, and I had no business partners. It was just me. So I went all out on a ledge by myself to try and figure all this out. And I still basically acted as the CTO of this new company. But one of the really big mistakes I made is I thought I knew what the market needed. Because I was building something to solve my own problem, which had to do with application performance monitoring type products. And I thought I had it all figured out. I'm like, I'm smart. I just had this big exit, had a big success. Like, I'm going to go build this thing, and everything I touch is going to turn to gold or something, right? And learned very quickly that that was not the case. Not only was it super difficult to do this again, it was a totally different market, totally different kind of product, everything else. But I made the mistake of thinking I knew too much about what the market wanted because I thought I was the customer. And it took us 3 or 4 years really of working through and building stuff. And we had, a small amount of success and we were growing, but we just never quite listened to the customer enough. That was the problem. We thought we knew too much about what we were needing to build because we were software engineers and we were building products for other software engineers. But we're still just a customer of one. We're not the whole industry. We're not the whole market. And we're, a startup. And if you're trying to sell to enterprise, we definitely didn't understand what the enterprise customers want because we didn't have their viewpoint. So I think that's one of the big mistakes I made in my career, and honestly probably spent millions of dollars in R&D and funding this business and all this until we finally got it all figured out. And we could have done things a lot different. And in the end of it, it all worked out great. We ended up growing a good business and exit and all this stuff. But it was a long, hard lesson of not only going from CTO to CEO, but not listening to the customer enough and thinking we knew too much.
And I wonder if your previous success, maybe just gave you a little bit of overconfidence.
It did.
And set you up for failure in your next. Well, it turned into success eventually, but it sounds like it was a hard road to get there.
It did. Yeah, definitely learned a lot from it and learned a lot from going from CTO to CEO and what the heck that meant too.
Well, listen, thank you for sharing that. It's always useful for our wannabe CTOs to learn that the path hasn't always been as smooth and that you're able to recover from those situations, learn and move on. So it's really useful. Thanks for sharing that. All right. So we've had a great chat with Matt Watson today. We've really understood that the CTO role is not only a complex role and that you need to have built up lots of skills and experience to be able to fill that kind of leadership role, but actually there are different key strengths within that role, and recognizing that at some point, not necessarily early in your career, but at the appropriate point, recognizing where you can play to your strengths, and then finding a solution, finding a role that suits those strengths. So if you're more operational, then you need to go somewhere where maybe there's a visionary kind of CEO who's a bit more product-y. They've built a technical product, but nobody's, they're scaling. Nobody knows how to run it properly. Nobody knows how to deal with all of the customers and growth that they've got. And if you're more operational, well, maybe you should go into sort of scale-ups rather than start with startups who really can't afford to have your skill set at that point. So there's lots of sort of, I would describe it as horses for courses there, and it's working out what you prefer as an individual, where your strengths lie, and then also from a company perspective, from a CEO, CTO hiring perspective, making sure that they understand what they need at the right points in their journey. I think that was something that was really important. And then one of the things is, if you are that CTO who you step in and maybe you are more technically focused into that startup early days, as you grow and scale, Matt was telling us, don't be a hero. You can't do everything. You've got to understand where your strengths and weaknesses are. You've got to understand when it's time to bring in another skill set. And we touched on the fact that you might even be able to do that fractionally, particularly if you're a startup and you haven't got a big budget. You might be able to spread that money out a little bit better through using the fractional network and getting the right skills at the right time. We touched on not so much becoming a CTO, but the skill sets that you need, the attitudes you need. And Matt's written what sounds like a really great book, and he was able to bring some of that product-driven thinking into our conversation. And in particular, we talked about maybe the engineers of the future are going to have to come a little bit to the middle ground with a bit more business thinking, a bit more product thinking, and maybe the product and commercial people, through the use of AI or low-code tooling, are going to be able to meet the engineers in the middle. And if everybody's dancing to the same tune in the middle, it sounds to me like that might have a more productive outcome. So yeah, that's what we talked about. I think we got some really good insights there. Matt, let me come back to you and see what your takeaway is for our audience.
Everything starts with why. Everything. And I think the biggest struggle for software engineering is that the team doesn't understand the big picture. They don't understand, why are we doing this? Somebody gave me these requirements. I don't understand why. They don't understand the trade-offs. Why did we do this thing and not this thing? And all of those details are so important for the team for how they make decisions, right? Am I trying to make this perform really well or scale, or is this some pet project for the CEO that they're going to demo next week and then throw the whole thing away? If I don't understand the why behind what needs to be done, I'm going to build for flexibility. I'm going to over-engineer things. I'm going to overcomplicate because I don't understand really what we're doing. So I got to handle every scenario, right? And in the book, I think I best describe this as vision. And I don't mean vision from like some goofy HR thing that's on the wall. I mean from a tactical perspective. Why are we doing this thing today? That sort of tactical vision is really important. And as leaders, it's easy for us in our head to know why we're doing it, but the team is never going to have ownership, and the team is never going to understand unless you explain your thinking to them. They have to understand, why are we doing this, and get that out of your head. And that's really hard if it's in your head, because you just think everybody else should think the same way, but they don't.
So I think that's a great takeaway for our existing C-suite leaders to remember to communicate the why down to the teams, and for our wannabe C-suite leaders who are coming through to remember to ask the why. And it's okay, give them license to say, look, you want me to come on this journey with you, got to spend a little bit of time painting that picture for me. Right?
Tell them thank you when they say why.
Yeah,
thank you for asking. Thanks for caring.
That's great. Well, thank you very much, Matt. Really appreciate you giving us a takeaway there. Okay, so thanks for listening to today's episode. We talked to Matt Watson. It was really great. Matt, good luck with your book. Having read a few of the chapters, I know it's going to be a humdinger. So really good luck with the sales there. And I think I've just heard somebody say that they're going to send a private jet to bring you to our
nice.
our London Tech Leaders Summit on the 7th and 8th of October in London here. So maybe we'll get a beer when you're over here. Yeah.
Awesome. I'll look forward to that.
Brilliant. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.